My husband was secretly having another girl while I was working 2 jobs to pay for my daughter's dancing, so I told his parents. My name is Lenora, and if you had asked me 10 years ago where I thought I'd be by now, I would have painted a picture of peace. A little home. A loving husband. A happy daughter. And for a while, I truly believed I had all those things. I met Darwin 8 years ago under the kind of circumstances people write off as fate. It was in a roadside diner, of all places. A storm had swept through our small Midwestern town, washing out the highway and stranding travelers. Cell towers were down, roads impassable, and this one diner, the only place with light and warmth, had become a strange haven. We were strangers at first, 2 people sitting across from each other at the bar, sipping coffee and sharing glances as lightning struck in the distance. But eventually, we got to talking. Then laughing. And, when the hours dragged on, we joined a group of locals playing cards to pass the time. For 6 hours, we joked and played like old friends while the storm raged outside. That night changed everything. We exchanged emails the next morning once service returned. A month later, we were officially dating. 2 years after that, we were married. Our daughter, Rosalie, came into our lives a couple of years later, and she brought with her this vibrant energy that seemed to paint color into every room. She's 6 now, and still very much that same spark dancing through the halls, leaping across furniture, humming melodies even in her sleep. Her joy is so constant, so contagious, that you almost forget how fragile it all is. A few months ago, Rosalie started talking non-stop about her classmate Harper, who had recently joined a dance school in town. Harper, it seemed, had real ballet slippers and got to twirl around in a tutu every Saturday morning. Rosalie asked, no, begged, to try dance too. And how could I say no? She had so much energy bottled inside her. Dance felt like the perfect outlet. Something fun. Something good. That evening, I mentioned it to Darwin. We were sitting at the kitchen table. He was scrolling through his phone, barely listening. When I said the words dance class, he gave this dry little laugh, not the warm one I'd fallen for, but something short, almost dismissive. He said, we can't afford dance classes right now, not on my salary alone. That stung. Especially because I wasn't just sitting around. I had been working part-time since Rosalie was born. We agreed on it together, I'd stay home more while she was young. We were still paying our bills, had no debt, and while we weren't rich by any stretch, I didn't think $60 a month would break us. When I pointed that out, Darwin opened our bank app and showed me our account. The numbers didn't make sense. There was barely anything left over after bills. But I couldn't explain what felt wrong about it. Darwin has always handled our finances. He's the numbers person, or so he claimed. I trusted him. Still, I wanted Rosalie to dance. So I made a decision. I picked up a second job, an evening shift at a small diner not far from our neighborhood. It wasn't glamorous, but the hours worked. I do my regular admin job during the day, then serve tables 4 nights a week. The tips weren't much, but I figured if I saved carefully, I could cover the classes myself. The schedule was brutal. I'd come home aching, reeking of grease and floor cleaner. There were nights I could barely keep my eyes open while tucking Rosalie into bed. When I mentioned how tired I was, Darwin rolled his eyes. He said, well, you wanted to work. Don't act like a martyr. I remember that moment vividly. I had been scrubbing dishes in the sink, and I paused, not because the words hurt exactly, but because they were so cold. It wasn't like him. Or, at least, not like the version of him I'd chosen to remember. Still, I swallowed my pride. It was for Rosalie. I was doing this for her. But the weeks kept passing. Then months. And every time I brought up the dance classes, Darwin had an excuse. The studio's full. Let's wait for the next session. We should save a bit more first. Meanwhile, Rosalie was talking about trips to the zoo on the nights I was working. She came home with toys I didn't buy. She started talking about someone named Marla, apparently Daddy's friend. I asked Darwin, casually, who Marla was. He said she was a colleague. Going through a rough patch, divorce, loneliness, that sort of thing. He said she liked kids, and it gave him some adult conversation while I was at work. I wanted to believe that. It sounded logical. Generous, even. But then Rosalie started saying things that left my heart racing. She told me, once, that Marla takes better photos than me. Another time, she asked if Marla could come to her birthday party. But the one that shook me the most was when she called me Leah by accident. I corrected her gently, and she blinked and said, oh, that's what Marla calls you. I thought that was your name. Something snapped in me that day. A silent alarm went off. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just started paying attention. I checked Darwin's social media. Nothing unusual. No trace of Marla. I asked about her again, he got defensive. Said I was being paranoid, jealous even. That his friendship with Marla wasn't up for debate. Then, about 3 months ago, I came home early from a shift. The diner was slow, so I clocked out early and decided to surprise Rosalie. The house was empty. Darwin's car was gone. I texted him. No reply. An hour later, he messaged me saying they went to get ice cream and would be back soon. When they returned, Rosalie was buzzing with excitement, not about ice cream, but about a movie. She mentioned seeing a cartoon and how funny it was. She also had on a brand new outfit I had never seen before. That night, after she fell asleep, I asked Darwin about it. Why lie about where they were? Why did Rosalie have new clothes when we couldn't afford ballet shoes? And who, exactly, was Marla to our family? Darwin stared at me for a moment with this unfamiliar expression, something closed off and calculating. Then he said, maybe if you were more fun, she'd still call you mommy. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just walked out of the room and sat on the porch until the sun came up. That was 5 months ago. Since then, I've been quiet. Watching. Working. And I've started to piece it all together. In the months that followed, I kept to my routine. Early mornings with Rosalie, my office job, dinner prep, and then late nights at the diner. But now I was watching everything. Every receipt Darwin left on the counter. Every comment Rosalie made. Every time Darwin's phone buzzed after midnight. There was a pattern forming. Rosalie would casually mention that she'd been to Miss Marla's house. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just an after-work hangout, maybe an occasional favor. But then came the bedtime story about the other bedroom with sparkly curtains, and the toothbrush with unicorns, just like mine at home. She said Marla had given it to her so she'd have one at both houses. Both houses. Those words landed heavily. I didn't react. I told her that sounded nice. Then I went into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror until my knees gave out. That night, after she fell asleep, I pulled up Darwin's old folder in our filing cabinet. The one he told me not to worry about, the one labeled simply budget. I expected boring spreadsheets and bills. What I found was far worse. There was a statement from a bank I didn't recognize. A credit union across town. The account was in Darwin's name only. I called the bank the next day on my lunch break. They wouldn't give much over the phone, but I was able to walk in with my ID and prove I was his spouse. We had a joint account, after all. The clerk, an older woman named Brenda, looked at me with tired sympathy as I explained what I needed. She asked if I wanted printed statements. I nodded. What she handed me made me dizzy. Every month, Darwin had been transferring $300 to $500 into that hidden account. Like clockwork. And sometimes even more. On certain weeks, coincidentally the same ones he claimed to be working late, there were larger withdrawals, hotel charges, and restaurant tabs that didn't match our lifestyle at all. Then there was a jewelry store purchase. Over $1,200, just before Christmas. I remembered the scarf he gave me, a clearance item from the department store. I'd even thanked him for it. At that moment, I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I felt awake. That same afternoon, I left work a bit early and drove straight to the diner. I waited for the manager to step into the back room before asking if I could shift my hours. I offered to open every weekday instead of working nights. Told her I wanted to be with my daughter more in the evenings. She said yes without hesitation. That night, I told Darwin I was changing my schedule. He barely looked up from his phone. Asked if that meant I was giving up the extra money. I told him I'd manage. He didn't argue. That alone told me something had changed. The next day, I picked up Rosalie from school and surprised her with a trip to the local dance studio, the one her friend Harper attended. We walked through the doors, and her whole face lit up. She touched the wall of ballet shoes and whispered, "These are real." I signed her up on the spot. 3 months in advance. Paid in full with my own money. When I told her, she clapped so hard her cheeks turned pink. We drove home with a small bag containing a pair of soft pink slippers and her first leotard. When Darwin saw it, he frowned. Asked where the money came from. I told him I'd saved from my tips. He didn't respond. Just nodded, but there was something new in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe. Later that week, I decided to go deeper. I went through our shared files on the home computer. Most of it was benign, but then I noticed a folder labeled taxes, investment property. Inside were scanned documents from a real estate company downtown. A condo. Newly built. Leased in Darwin's name. I read the contract twice. The address wasn't far from Rosalie's school. Close enough to explain how easily he could pick her up, take her somewhere else, and be back before I got home from work. I drove by the next day during my lunch break. It was a modern building, brick and glass, the kind with a coffee shop on the first floor and luxury apartments above. There was a small courtyard, a gated parking lot, and a sign advertising resort-style amenities. That was when I started taking photos. Every document I found, every credit card transaction that didn't make sense, every message I could recover from our family laptop, I saved them. I printed copies and stored them at my mom's house. I opened a cloud folder, encrypted and hidden, just for me. I also started using a new notebook, one Rosalie had given me for Mother's Day. I wrote down every odd interaction, every deflection, every time he came home late or left early. I didn't confront him. I just took notes. I wanted to know everything before I moved. Then, something unexpected happened. Rosalie asked me if Marla was going to be her other mommy soon. We were sitting at breakfast. She was spooning cereal into her mouth like nothing was unusual. I dropped my fork. I asked her why she thought that. She shrugged, like children do, and said, because Daddy says Marla's special and that she loves me a lot. And I sleep in her house sometimes, so maybe I'll have two mommies. I nodded. My voice stayed calm. That's a good question, sweetheart, I told her. Let's talk about it more later. After dropping her at school, I sat in my car and didn't move for half an hour. When I finally started the engine, I didn't go to work. I drove to the office of a family lawyer whose name I'd scribbled down 2 weeks prior. Her name was Eloise Moran, and from the moment she shook my hand, I knew I'd come to the right place. She didn't pity me. She listened. She asked good questions. She took everything seriously. After I laid it all out, the accounts, the condo, the other woman, the deception, she asked me one thing. What outcome are you hoping for, Lenora? I paused. I hadn't thought about it in such a direct way. I want to protect my daughter, I said finally. I want to stop living in someone else's lie. She nodded slowly and said, then we begin with documentation. And we move carefully. We scheduled a follow-up for the following week. She gave me a list of things to gather, tax forms, insurance paperwork, a copy of the condo deed if possible. And she warned me, don't tip your hand too early. So that's where I am now. Still playing the role of the quiet, compliant wife. Still packing Rosalie's lunches. Still answering Darwin's half-hearted questions with neutral responses. But beneath all that? I'm getting ready. The week after I met with Eloise, I kept things quiet. Rosalie and I were settling into a rhythm. I had moved my diner shifts to the early mornings, which meant I could pick her up from school, take her to dance class, and even have time to cook dinner together. It was peaceful, strangely so, given the truth lurking underneath everything. And for the first time in months, Rosalie called me mommy again, softly, like she was remembering something long forgotten. I nearly dropped the laundry basket I was carrying and had to excuse myself to cry in the hallway. I didn't want her to see how much it meant. Meanwhile, Darwin was getting restless. Suspicious, even. He began asking pointed questions about my work schedule, about whether I was still saving money from my tips, about whether my mother might be visiting soon. One morning, I found him looking through my phone. I had stepped into the bathroom for only a few minutes, and when I came out, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling. He tried to play it off, said he thought it was his, but the tension in his shoulders gave him away. I didn't say anything. Just picked up my phone and walked out of the room. But something had shifted. That night, he came home early with takeout, my favorite place, even though we rarely ordered from there anymore. He asked if we could talk. Said he wanted to reconnect. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. He talked about taking a family trip somewhere quiet. Just the three of us. Maybe a beach, maybe a cabin. He said we'd been distant and that he wanted to fix that. Then he reached for my hand. I let him take it. He looked hopeful for a moment. But I was measuring his pulse, memorizing the sweat in his palm, the look in his eyes. He was nervous. Not sentimental. Not remorseful. Nervous. That's when I knew he suspected something. The next morning, I received a text from his mother. It was a simple message, a polite reminder about the upcoming 50th wedding anniversary party she and his father were hosting that weekend. We're so excited to see you and Rosalie. And we can't wait to finally meet Darwin's friend, Marla. She seems lovely. I stared at the message for a long time. So they knew about Marla. And Darwin had invited her to his parents' golden anniversary celebration. I replied that we'd be there and that I was also looking forward to meeting her. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to Eloise. She called me a few minutes later. "This could work in your favor," she said. "You'll have witnesses. And if Marla's there?" "I'll be prepared," I said. We made a plan. I would print selected documents, the condo deed, the hidden account transactions, photographs of Darwin and Marla with Rosalie, some of which I'd quietly found in Rosalie's dresser, tucked between books and drawings. I organized everything into a folder I labeled Family Records. My mother agreed to drive into town the morning of the party, just in case. I didn't tell her everything, only enough for her to know I might need support. That Friday night, Darwin brought home flowers. A full bouquet of roses. No occasion. No explanation. Just a card that read, "I love us. D." It was the third bouquet he'd given me in our entire marriage. I placed them in the guest bathroom and didn't say a word. The next morning, he offered to make breakfast. He was overly cheerful, asking if we wanted to stop by the park before the party. He kept looking at me like he was waiting for me to crack. I didn't. I matched his energy, offered to pick up a dessert on the way to his parents' house, and left for a quick errand. Instead, I drove to my mom's place. We sat in her kitchen while Rosalie played with a puzzle nearby. I handed her a folder and told her to keep it safe, just in case anything happened. She read a few pages and let out a slow breath. "This is bad, Lenora." I nodded. "I know." By the time we pulled back into our driveway, Darwin was waiting on the porch. When he saw my mother in the passenger seat, his expression faltered. We didn't speak much for the rest of the day. At 3 p.m. sharp, we arrived at his parents' house. The yard was decorated beautifully. String lights, framed photos from decades of marriage, tables filled with food and laughter. There were cousins, family friends, and a small band playing jazz near the back deck. Darwin's mother greeted us at the door, smiling warmly at Rosalie. Then she turned to me. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said. "Darwin said you might have to work." "Not today," I replied. "I've had this planned for weeks." Her smile stiffened slightly. We made our way inside. Rosalie ran off to play with the other kids, and Darwin vanished into the kitchen. I took a deep breath, pulled the folder from my bag, and approached his mother again. "I have something I'd like you to look at," I said. "Privately, if possible." She hesitated, then led me into the front sitting room. I handed her the folder and said simply, "This is about your son. And your granddaughter." She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the pages, the financial statements, the photos, the property deed. It took several minutes before she looked up. "This can't be right," she said, her voice tight. "I promise you, it is." Darwin's father joined us, and I watched his face change as he read. A slow shift from confusion to realization. Then silence. We heard the front door open again. Marla had arrived. She walked in like she belonged, smiling, holding a neatly wrapped gift bag, and waving at Darwin across the room. Everything went very quiet. Darwin's sister stood up from a nearby chair, crossed the room, and stopped Marla mid-step. "You're Marla?" she asked. "Yes," Marla said, eyes flicking around. "Did you know Darwin was married?" Marla blinked. "He said they were separated. Just living together until things were official." His sister raised the folder. "Does this look like a man who's separated?" She turned the folder toward her. On the top page was a photo, Christmas morning, just a few months ago. Me, Darwin, and Rosalie in matching pajamas. Marla didn't say anything. Her smile cracked. She turned, slowly, and left. Darwin followed her, calling her name, voice rising in pitch. The door shut behind them. And just like that, the party turned. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.